All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are going deep down under, all the way to Australia.
Oh, this sounds interesting.
We are diving into their higher education system.
Okay.
And it is a fascinating situation, to say the least.
I'm all ears.
Our main source is a speech delivered by Sheehy.
Okay.
He's the CEO of Universities Australia.
I've heard of him.
He delivered this to the National Press Club just recently. And let me tell you, he did not hold back.
I'm intrigued already.
So
yeah.
Sheehy, he's painting this picture of Australian universities at a very critical juncture.
Yeah.
Like, he's not mincing words.
Interesting.
He's saying it's not just that they're facing issues. He's saying they're facing a full-blown crisis.
A crisis. Wow.
Yeah.
That's strong language.
And he doesn't hesitate to point fingers.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he actually takes aim at both major Australian political parties. He claims that they have what he calls this anti-university rhetoric, and that they've contributed to this chronic underfunding of higher education in the country.
Interesting.
So he gives a concrete example of this. He talks about the Job Ready Graduates package.
Okay, I'm familiar with that.
Which was rolled out back in 2020.
Yeah.
Now, this policy was designed with good intentions in mind.
Sure.
It was supposed to help make education more affordable and, get people into jobs.
Right.
But Sheehy, he argues that it kind of backfired.
Interesting. So how so?
He says that this reform package actually ended up reducing funding to universities.
Oh, wow.
Which in turn created this massive deficit. And get this, it's almost $1 billion annually that's missing for student places.
$1 billion.
Yeah.
That's a huge amount of money.
That is a mind-boggling figure.
It really is.
To kind of put it into perspective.
Okay.
That missing $1 billion translates to roughly 33,000 fewer student places every single year.
Wow. So like 33,000 students every year are being denied a university education.
Yeah, essentially.
That's a lot of potential.
It's like they are closing the door on thousands of potential students.
Yeah. And, it's particularly alarming when you consider that Australia is actually projecting a need for...
Oh, right. Tell me about that.
1 million more domestic students per year by the year 2050.
That's right.
So they're facing this future where they're going to need a lot more skilled workers. But right now they are cutting funding to the education system that's supposed to train them.
Yeah, it's like they're working against themselves in a way.
It's a head scratcher for sure.
It is. It's a real head scratcher.
And then you add on this other layer with international students.
Oh, right. Yeah. What's going on there?
Well, international education is huge for Australia.
Okay.
It's their second biggest export, right behind mining.
Wow.
So all the revenue that comes from those international students actually gets used to help subsidize the education of Australian students.
Oh, I see.
So it benefits Australian taxpayers and Australian students.
So everybody wins in that situation.
Pretty much.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Sheehy, he criticizes proposals to limit international student enrollment.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because he sees it as this totally counterproductive thing to do when their goal is to boost the number of domestic students attending university.
So he thinks cutting back on international students is short-sighted.
Yes, very. But wouldn't limiting international student numbers free up more spaces for Australian students?
It's not quite that straightforward.
Okay.
Remember, the revenue from international students helps keep those tuition costs down for everybody.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So if you start cutting back on those numbers, universities are going to have to find that money from somewhere else.
I see. So it could actually backfire, and Australian students might end up paying more?
Potentially, yeah.
Interesting.
And it's not just universities that are concerned about this.
Oh, really?
Even the Reserve Bank of Australia, they've expressed concern.
About what?
About the potential risks.
What kind of risks?
Well, think about the broader impact on the economy.
Okay.
Fewer international students means less spending in all sorts of industries.
Like what?
Well, hospitality, retail, tourism, you name it.
Wow. So it's a ripple effect.
Exactly. Those sectors rely on that spending power and the labor from international students.
So it's not just about the universities.
No, not at all.
It's about the whole Australian economy.
Precisely.
That's a big deal.
It is. And then, of course, there's that loss of that critical revenue stream for the universities themselves.
That's right, yeah.
All that money gets reinvested in research, infrastructure. It helps create a better learning environment for everyone.
So really, Sheehy is arguing that cutting back on international students could end up harming the Australian economy in the long run.
Yeah, that's his point. He thinks it could jeopardize Australia's future prosperity.
Wow. That's a pretty big claim.
It is. It's definitely a bold statement.
Well, let's move on to another interesting point that he makes. He talks about this projected need to educate 1 million more domestic students every year by 2050.
Yeah.
Just trying to imagine that 1 million more students every year.
It's mind-boggling.
That's a huge influx of students.
It is.
I mean, where are they going to put them all?
That's a big part of the challenge.
Yeah.
They would need to go through a massive infrastructure expansion.
Oh,
New classrooms, labs, housing, you name it.
Yeah.
It would require serious funding.
It would.
Definitely.
Now, here's where things get even more complicated.
Okay.
Sheehy brings up the closure of the Education Investment Fund.
Right.
Back in 2019.
Yeah.
Now, this was a fund specifically for university infrastructure projects.
Oh, so they shut that down.
Yeah, and he claims that shutting it down has created a major obstacle to expansion.
Well, yeah, I can see how that would be a problem.
He uses this striking analogy.
Oh, tell me.
He says it's like trying to build a skyscraper, but without any concrete.
Yeah.
They need those resources to create the spaces.
Yeah.
For all these students...
It's like they're trying to host a party,
yeah,
but they haven't built enough rooms.
That's a good way to put it.
And then, of course, there's another big concern that he brings up.
What's that?
The need for increased investment in research and development.
R&D.
Yeah, R&D, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
He's saying Australia's falling behind other developed nations in this area. He throws out this pretty shocking statistic.
What is it?
He says Australia's current R&D investment is only 1.66% of their GDP.
Wow, that's low.
It is, and for context, that's nearly 40% below the average for other OECD countries.
Oh, so they are lagging behind significantly.
Yeah, the OECD is a group of mostly wealthy, developed countries.
Right.
So to be lagging so far behind is concerning.
That's a big deal. Because research and development are so important for economic growth and technological progress.
It's essential.
So if Australia wants to keep up on the global stage,
they got to invest.
They need to invest in these areas.
It's like a tech company trying to compete, but they're spending way less on research and development.
Yeah, eventually that's going to catch up with them.
It will.
So Sheehy is saying that Australia is risking its future.
Yeah, by underfunding R&D.
It's come to the point where Robin Denholm, you know, the person heading up this government review of the R&D system.
Yeah.
She's actually labeled the situation a national emergency.
A national emergency? That's pretty serious.
It is. They're definitely starting to wake up to the seriousness of this.
Yeah, but how is all this lack of funding affecting researchers and students?
That's a good question.
Like, on the ground level, what's actually happening?
Yeah.
Well, Sheehy gives an example.
Go on.
He talks about PhD students.
Okay.
And he says that their base stipend...
What's a stipend?
Basically, the money they get to live on while they do their research.
Okay.
It's actually significantly lower than a living wage.
Oh, wow.
Imagine trying to conduct groundbreaking research while struggling to afford rent.
Yeah, not easy.
It's a pretty difficult situation.
It is. It really raises questions about how Australia is going to attract top talent.
Yeah. If they're not supporting those students adequately...
It's a problem.
It is a big problem. Yeah, it makes you really think about the challenges these folks are facing, trying to make a career in research in Australia.
It's a tough gig for sure.
And it seems like the system's not really helping them out much.
And that's what Sheehy keeps coming back to in this speech, right?
Absolutely. It's all about priorities.
Okay.
He's arguing that universities are crucial for Australia's future success, and they need to be treated like a top policy priority.
So it's about more than just money.
Yeah.
The whole mindset shift, right?
It is, totally. How the government and the public see higher education, that needs to change.
And to drive that point home, Sheehy gets kind of personal.
Yeah, he shares his own story.
About being the first in his family to get a degree.
Right, and how that changed everything for him, opened up so many doors.
Yeah, really powerful stuff.
And I think he's trying to show, you know, that education can be a way for people to move up in the world, to overcome barriers, to create a fairer society.
I see. So it's not just about, like, individual success.
Right.
It's about opportunity for everyone.
Exactly. And this ties back into what we were talking about before, you know, Australia needing 1 million more skilled workers in the future.
Right.
If they want to meet that demand, they got to make sure everyone who can succeed in higher ed can actually get there.
It's not just about how many graduates they pump out. It's about quality, too.
Absolutely. These grads need to be ready to tackle the really tough issues of the 21st century.
Like what kind of issues?
Oh, climate change, all this crazy tech that's changing everything, global pandemics, political instability, it never bends.
It's a lot.
It is, and they need people who can think critically, be creative, and adapt to whatever comes next.
So it sounds like Sheehy is saying, wake up, Australia.
Yeah, basically he's saying universities are vital, start treating them that way.
Like a call to action.
Definitely, and not just to the government, to everyone.
He wants a shift from short-term politics to actually thinking about the future.
Yes, exactly. Long-term planning for higher ed.
Okay, so funding is obviously a huge issue.
For sure.
But what else does he think needs to happen to make Aussie universities ready for what's coming?
Well, he talks a lot about expanding university infrastructure.
Oh, right, because of that massive increase in students.
Exactly. They're going to need more of everything.
Classrooms, labs, dorms.
Everything.
It's like a giant construction project.
It is, and of course that brings us back to the whole education investment fund debacle.
Yeah, that fund getting shut down.
Sheehy really lays into that decision.
How so?
He calls it a bipartisan raid, blames both parties for it.
Oh, wow.
Says it's crippled universities' ability to build and maintain the facilities they need.
So he thinks they should bring back that fund.
Absolutely. Top priority for the next government, he says.
No matter who wins the election.
Doesn't matter. It's about investing in Australia's future.
Okay, so more money for buildings.
Right.
But what about supporting the students?
Good point. She does mention some good things that have happened.
Like what?
They implemented some recommendations from the Universities Accord.
Right, that big plan to reform higher ed in Australia.
Yeah, things like adjusting the student loan program, making it more manageable, and offering some fee-free courses to get people ready for university.
Okay, that's progress.
It is, but he's not completely satisfied.
Oh, he thinks they need to do more.
Much more. More action, more commitment from the government to support students, make higher ed affordable and accessible.
He wants both sides to step up, huh?
Yeah, he specifically calls on the opposition party to get fully behind the Universities Accord.
So he's keeping the pressure on.
Absolutely. Acknowledges they've made progress, but says the really tough work is still ahead.
The heavy lifting, as he puts it.
Exactly.
So all this political back and forth, how does it actually impact the average Aussie?
Well, think about it this way. Australia's future, their success, it's all tied to how good their higher education system is.
Makes sense.
A well-educated workforce, that's how you get innovation, that's how you grow the economy, that's how you tackle big problems.
So when universities are struggling, the whole country feels it.
Precisely.
It's not just about the economy either.
Right.
It's about opportunity for people. Right.
Absolutely. If higher education is expensive or hard to get into, it's a barrier, especially for those who don't come from wealthy backgrounds.
It limits their potential.
Exactly. And that holds the entire country back.
And that's what Sheehy was talking about, right?
Yeah.
His own story, how going to university changed his life.
Yeah, it's that idea that anyone can achieve something great, no matter where they come from, that should be at the heart of the Australian dream.
A fair shot for everyone.
Exactly. And a strong higher education system is a big part of making that happen.
So where do things go from here? What's Sheehy's message? What's he hoping to achieve?
Well, he wraps up his speech with this really powerful challenge to the leaders of both parties.
Go on.
He asks them straight up, where do universities sit on your list of national priorities?
Making them think about where higher ed really fits in.
Right. It's not enough to just say education's important.
Got to walk the walk, right?
Exactly. And then he lists all these big issues: infrastructure, clean energy, healthcare, defense.
Important stuff.
And he points out you can't achieve any of that without highly skilled people.
Which universities are supposed to produce.
Exactly. He's connecting all these things together, showing how supporting higher ed isn't just some isolated expense, it's an investment in everything.
Makes sense.
He's basically saying, want a better future, build better universities.
I like that. Build better universities. It's not just spending, it's investing in Australia's future.
Exactly, in their people, their economy, their ability to succeed in the 21st century.
He's making it clear this isn't something they can ignore.
No, he says the time to act is now. Doesn't give easy answers, but he sure gets you thinking.
A challenging message, but definitely thought-provoking.
And it goes beyond Australia, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Every country's dealing with this.
How to get their people ready for the future.
How to make their education systems work in a world that's constantly changing.
It's a global issue.
Definitely. And it raises some big questions,
Like what?
It is. Every country is asking themselves the same things.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how these things connect, like what's happening in Australia. It's like a microcosm of this bigger conversation.
It is. It really
It's
is.
about how to prepare people for the future.
Exactly.
But you know what I find interesting?
Yeah.
Is that Sheehy, he seems kind of optimistic.
Oh, you think so?
Well, he thinks things can change.
Yeah.
He doesn't end his speech all doom and gloom,
True. He's not saying it's hopeless.
No, he wants people to talk about it and to do something.
Right. He doesn't want people to just pick a side, blindly support one party over the other.
Yeah, like a political football.
Exactly. He wants everyone to hold their leaders accountable, make higher education a priority.
No matter who's in charge.
Exactly. He's trying to move past all that partisan stuff.
Yeah.
Focus on what's good for Australia in the long run.
It's about the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I think one of the most interesting things is how he connects all these different issues.
Oh, yeah, tell me about that.
Like he's talking about infrastructure, clean energy, healthcare.
Yeah.
And he shows how all of those things depend on a strong higher education system.
It's all connected.
Right. If one part of the system weakens, the whole thing suffers.
It makes you realize that universities, they're not just off on their own,
No, they're not.
They're a vital part of everything.
Everything. And it's not just about training people for specific jobs. It's about, critical thinking, problem solving, being innovative.
The stuff you need no matter what you do.
Exactly. Those are the skills you need in a world that's changing so fast.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
yeah,
what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember from this conversation?
I think the main takeaway is this. The choices Australia makes about higher education, those choices have consequences.
They matter.
They really do. But there's challenges and opportunities, right? They have this chance to build a truly world-class education system. Wow. Something that can drive innovation and prosperity for generations.
It's a big deal.
It is, but it takes vision.
And commitment.
Definitely. They need to invest in their universities for the long haul.
And this is a lesson for everyone, isn't it?
Absolutely. Not just Australia.
Every country is wrestling with these issues. It makes you think, what can we do to make sure universities are ready for the future?
Yeah, how do we fund them? How do we make them more innovative? How do we make sure everyone can access higher education?
Big questions.
Big questions. And I think those are questions we're going to be grappling with for a long time.
I think you're right.
In Australia and around the world.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive into the world of Aussie higher ed.
It has.
Thanks for joining us.